Thank you for Patreon now for donating to the Patreon.
Hey guys, it's Vin back at another Card Fight Vanguard Duck Profile. If you enjoyed, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and donate to the Patreon. Let's get one started, shall we? Today we have Raptors from Tachikaze. Now, to give a little backstory on Raptors, or just Tachikaze in general, I was always fascinated by the dinosaur aspect of Tachikaze. To the very few commenters / subscribers that I think know who I am, they all probably know I was a big fan of Power Rangers Dino Thunder growing up, and this has nothing to do with it, it's just the fact that they had dinosaurs, and I love dinosaurs. And I just love the aspect of Tachikaze because they are literally mostly all dinosaurs except for the exception of very few cards. And, in V, I don't really like Tachikaze that much just because, all of the decks except for one focus on Equip Gauge, and that one is Trained Dragons, and we can argue that Raptors don't, but considering only the Grade 3 doesn't, it's a debatable statement to say the least. So, with the introduction of Raptors, one of my favorite ride lines of all time, well, it's fitting that I do a deck profile on them. So let's go ahead and get that deck profile started. First up, we have our starter in Minimum Carno, grade 0 boost, 10k shield, 6k base. Auto is road upon, draw a card, then your opponent's Vanguard's grade 1 grade, put a quick show ticket to your hand. I have fond memories of using this card. Those back in the days where I was forced to play very certain decks back in area because none of my keyboard buttons worked. Those days where I played V Tachikaze. Minimum Carno, my successive failures with trying to sack fronts with Trained Dragons. Yes, I remember you very distinctly, except this is the deck I can actually sack fronts in. So, Minimum Carno and I, we have sat through thick and thin, not sacking front triggers like the worst time physically possible. Me and Minimum Carno, we're best buds right here, tiny little dragon boy and tiny boy trying to win games. Together we are one. This is the starter of choice with the standard draw and quick shield. Not too special about him, but he is one of my favorite starters. So Minimum Carno gets the bill. Next up, we have Archbird, our draw trigger, grade 0 boost, 0 shield, 5k shield, continuous sentinel. You have to force summons your deck and auto guard circle. When placed, discard a card from your hand, one of your use cannot be turned to battle. So, the draw trigger, in my opinion, works best in this deck because you want to get hand cards, especially because for Raptor Colonel to go off, you need to constantly sack 5 rear guards. So, being able to draw to replace those 5, even if technically you're only killing 2, because if you play it like how I do, the 3 of the 5 rear guards you sack will end up just calling themselves or calling something else out of it. So you're really not minusing 5, you're minusing 2. And I prefer the draw trigger because you do need to draw those units for it to go in. But I can definitely see it if someone wants to replace this with the Crit Sentinel, because the Crit Sentinel has a lot of shield behind it, doesn't require you to discard a card for it, and having a restanding Vanguard with an extra crit on it definitely shows some pressure. So I could definitely see someone running a Crit Sentinel in this, and I can see people running draw PGs in this. I prefer the draw PG, but the Crit Sentinel would probably work just as fine. So I could see it going either way on that one. I do suggest we run 8 fronts though, regardless, just because like I said before, in this deck, there are 2 ways you can win. There is the Raptor Colonel way, where if you get the main grade 3 off half the time, you're going to have to call rear guards, and granted they get 5k during the battle phase, but downside is there will most likely only be 14 to 16k swinger, so they're not really that pressurable. They're 5k drops, and on occasions they will hit 19, but unless all 3 of those extra attacks are Mega Rexes, which is almost physically impossible, yeah, it's not really going to go well. So you want these 8 fronts here just to, add a little bit of power to those extra units that are being called from Raptor Colonel skill. And the other way you can play this deck is you rely on Anger Blader, who can restand units, but even then you're still going to need fronts. So you want the fronts here just to increase the power, which is why I think you could replace the draw for a crit, but otherwise keep the 8 fronts. And then our heal trigger is Younger Parasound. Yeah, we all know my opinions on Hero Guardians by now. If you don't know my opinion on Hero Guardians, go watch a video from 3 weeks ago. You'll probably get an actual response, but the main thing is they don't really go with my style. In the entirety of since Hero Guardians have been released, there has been 1 game where a Heal Guardian would have actually been useful to me, and every other game since their release they have never would have been useful to me at all whatsoever. And that 1 game was on camera, and even then I was probably going to lose that 1 game anyways. Heal Guardians have shown literally no purpose to me in the 1 deck I run them in, and they don't deserve to be ran in my personal builds. If you want to run them because they work for you, put them in your deck, but I don't like them because they hurt my style too much. You can still run them in my builds, just don't play my style. So 4 copies of Younger Parasound because I do like it more than Heal Guardians. Also, it's cute. Next up, we have our grade 1s. 4 copies of the only thing in this deck that isn't a dinosaur, unless you count Archbird, which technically is a dinosaur and technically it isn't. Savage Shooter, grade 1 boost, 10k shield, 8k base. Auto Van when placed, Soul Blast 1, draw a card and call a card from your hand to rear guard, put the top card of your deck face down as an equip gauge for that called unit. So this deck does require you to want to ride the Raptor grade 1. I mean, technically you don't have to, but you want to ride it just to get the free search. But just in case maybe you don't need the free search because you already have the other 2 Raptors in hand, or maybe because you cannot ride the grade 1 because maybe you don't have it in hand, there's always the backup grade 1 ride target, which is Savage Shooter, who, just by soul blasting your starter, you already get a draw from, but then you get another draw, and you can get a rear guard out of it, which means you can multi-attack on grade 1 turn, or get a good attack on grade 1 turn, and then gauge it for later purposes, which is really nice, and act a rear guard, rest this unit, put a card from your drop zone face down as an equip gauge for one of your rear guards without any equip gauges on it. So I always forget that part, that it has to be on a unit without any equip gauges, but that's still pretty good, because it nets you a free equip gauge just by resting it, and the combo play that you have to pull off with this deck to get multi-attacks out of is kind of decently hard to pull off, but then, you kind of want to selectively get the right cards under them. So Savage Shooter really is nice for that, for giving equip gauges to the units that want them out of the 3 units that you need on board for it, and you can also just give one to Mega Rex because Mega Rex is a really good support card. Like, Savage Shooter does a lot for this deck, get you a free equip gauge when you need it on the cards that need it, and is a great replaceable grade 1 ride target if you need it. Now, if you want to replace it with Prison Bird, I could also see that too. I do have some problems riding Raptor Colonel because I literally had to cherry pick the games that were going to be played in the Celia versus Raptor matchup because I'm not going to say it, but Raptors were going to lose regardless. They lost every single round except for one, and that one game was technically a bonus round that I chose to make a game 2. So, and all I wanted to do was just show off Raptor's abilities, and I couldn't really get to do that. So that was the whole point of using that. But if you want to put in Prison Bird because it gets more power when searching, I can see it, but I do prefer Savage Shooter because he acts as a support grade 1 ride target. Then we have Darting Dragon Blue Sprint. I think regardless of what you run as your backup grade 3 or what's in the rest of this deck, this should be ran out of 4 of. Grade 1 boost, 10k shield, 8k base, auto van or rear. When it attacks, you may put the top card of your deck face down as an equip gauge for one of your rear guards, and auto when it's retired from rear guard via your card's abilities, aka, what's it called? I just forgot his name, Raptor Colonel. Call to one of this unit's equip gauges to rear guard, and you may gauge that unit. And this ability may only be used once per turn by a card of the same name once per turn. So it isn't named once per turn, which means you can only use it once that turn, but when it swings into anything, you get a free gauge to anyone, and, if he dies via your Vanguard's ability, he can die by anything, but it's most likely going to die via Vanguard ability, you get to call the gauge, and you can combo with Savage Shooter by putting maybe something you want to call under it, and then kill it, and then call that thing you wanted to call. So Blue Sprint's all around really good, adds support for your Raptor Colonel, so when you kill him, you're not really losing a rear guard, you're just replacing the rear guard, and hell, it could probably be something stronger out of it, and it allows for combo plays as you will. So 4 copies of Darting Dragon Blue Sprint because you use a really good card in the deck that can get you multi-attack and make your -5 a -3 if you play it right. -2 if you play it right. Then our last grade 1 is 4 copies of our obviously main grade 1, Military Dragon Raptor Sergeant. Grade 1 boost, 10k shield, 8k base, auto when it's placed on Vanguard Circle, look at top 7, or choose up to 1 grade 2 or grade of Military Dragon's card name from among them, reveal it, put it to your hand, shuffle your deck. So, you get the grade 2 or you get the grade 3. Now, you can't really get itself, but, pretty good that it can search the rest of the ride line. And auto van or rear, when this unit attacks or boosts, choose one of your rear guards without any equip gauges on it, and you may gauge that card. So it's kind of a downside that we have 2 units that require the unit that you gauge not to have gauges to begin with, and then Darting Dragon has to swing for it, which means you have to play it kind of weird because then you can't really swing with any of your grade 1s. But Raptor Sergeant, boost with any of your grade 1s, but Raptor Sergeant's still pretty good because in reality, unless you are really sitting on Anger Blader, you don't need to constantly gauge people. You would only need 1 gauge at a time because Savage Shooter gives you 1. You just need 1 for your grade 2, so Raptor Sergeant gives you 1. And then for the other grade 2, this one also gives you 1. So, you don't really need that many gauges unless you genuinely are sitting on Anger Blader. Okay, then it's a problem, but otherwise, this deck works perfectly well as long as you don't have to sit on Anger Blader for a long enough time. So Raptor Sergeant is definitely a good grade 1 as it just gets you that search and it gets you a free equip gauge. So 4 copies of it. Also, I really do like its art. Next up, we have our grade 2 is 3 copies of Ravenous Dragon Mega Rex. Grade 2, intercept, 5k shield, 9k base, auto van or rear. When it attacks a Vanguard, retire another rear guard to draw a card. Then if it was on rear, counterblast 1 and get a gauge for it, and it gets plus 5k until in the battle for every equip gauge on it. So, you get a draw, which is really nice, and via counterblast, so kind of getting into the territory of Anger Blader and Colonel here with the counter blast, which is kind of bad, but it's fine. It'll get +5 for each gauge on it, and it will gauge itself, so it's at least getting a 14k swing out of it. But if you combine it with either the grade 2 version of Blue Sprint or Blue Sprint himself, it will also have another gauge on it because you could gauge it via their skills when retired. So the boy will swing for 19, and it's always a really good number to swing for, especially when you combine it with Colonel, who, because it was called during battle phase, will make it a 24. So this deck can definitely hit numbers during battle phase. It can get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 attacks in a turn if you go second, and that's really good. And even if you don't go second, if you go first, you can still get 7 attacks out of it and not minus as much. Mega Rex is definitely a good grade 2 for this deck. Good in an early rush, good in a late rush, because anything that can be called during the battle phase is a really good card for Colonel. 3 copies of Mega Rex. Next up, we have 4 copies of the other part of the combo to -2 instead of -5. Regiment Dragon Regidon. Grade 2, intercept 5k shield, 9k base, auto Vanner rear. When it attacks, you may put the top card of your deck face down as an equip gauge for one of your rear guards. So, it's the same thing as Blue Sprint. No, and then the other skill is also the exact same as Blue Sprint. Items retire from rear guard by your card's ability. Call to one of this unit's equip gauge to rear. Then you may gauge that card, and it's named once per turn. So, they share the same ability, but all around, that's pretty good because, you can once more use it with because it's a name once per turn, you can just combo them together and then swing with both of them, then retire both of them via Colonel, and then call them back, or not call them back, but call their gauges back. Boom, you didn't lose the rear guards. I mean, they may have gotten weaker or stronger, but you didn't lose rear guards to swing with. You actually got more rear guards back, and you didn't really lose rear guards to begin with. That's what I love about this deck. You can literally combo play into more combos. It's very funny. Gaia couldn't do this, or at least in my memory, Gaia couldn't do this. This one can. It's very funny, just via one Vanguard attack. I feel like it's more fitting than Gaia. So, comboing this card is not that bad. So all around, this is a definitely really good grade 2, and I love using it in this deck. 4 of it definitely feels like it fits. Next up, we have 4 of Military Dragon, Raptor Captain. Grade 2, intercept 5k shield, 9k base. Auto is wrote upon by Military Dragon Raptor Colonel, the grade 3. Soul Boss 1, search your deck up to 2 grade 2 or less cards of Military Dragon and their card names, call and shuffle your deck. And then auto, when this unit with an equip gauge on is retired from your rear guard card's ability, Soul Boss 1 and call this card to an open rear guard circle. So, there's a decent amount to unpack with the skill. First up, if you ride upon it with the grade 3, and this can help you search for the grade 3 or the grade 2 for that matter to ride it, you basically can get the grade 2 out. You can either get 2 copies of the grade 2 out, 2 copies of the grade 1 out, or one of each, or just one of one and then none of the other, or none of either. You could just Soul Boss if you really wanted to. And then auto, the other ability, allows you, to call it if it dies, as long as it has a gauge on it. And that's where And that's where Savage Shooter comes in. You use him to gauge the boy who has no way of getting gauges himself. Boom, he has a gauge, or you can use Sergeant to gauge him. And then, now you have the 3 card combo where if you swing with all of them, maybe you boost some of them, as you call one of them to an Excel Circle, obviously, probably Boost Sprint, so it can actually hit a Vanguard. And then you swing with Colonel skill, you nuke the 2 boosters for most likely Sergeant and Regiodon, and then you kill Blue Sprint as well, and then you kill these 2. All their skills go off. This one calls himself back via Soul Blast, this one calls his gauge, engages it, this one calls his gauge, engages it, etc., etc. All of them get +5 because they were all called during the battle phase, and you didn't really lose anything because your first drive check replaced the 2 rear guards you actually did kill, and then the restand and attack again gives you 2 more drives. So essentially you're losing really nothing out of it, and that is why I love Captain so much, and just the Colonel and all the Raptors, they all do their own things. Raptor Sergeant feels like kind of the worst one, but he still adds to the applicability of this combo, because otherwise you would be 1 gauge short. So all around, really nice card for Captain, because he is a part of this 4 card-ish combo, or 5 card-ish combo. 4 copies of Military Dragon Raptor Captain. 2 copies of Sundering Dragon, a Terror Therizino. God, I like the word Asunder so much, but I hate this card with my living soul. Grade 3 Twin Drive Excel Gift, 12k base, auto Vanguard rear guard. When it attacks a Vanguard, retire another rear guard, draw a card. If that unit was retired, if the unit retired for this cost had an equip gauge on it, choose one of your opponent's rear guards, retire it. Okay, when I ran this in Gaia, this thing went off so much. I can't explain it. This thing went off literally every time I would call it. But now in Colonel, or when I'm just running with Anger Blader or Colonel, obviously you don't want to use it with Anger Blader because you'll just lose the unit that you're trying to sack equip gauges with. But then when you use it with Colonel, you're kind of screwing yourself over unless you are going first. So why is this boy here? Here's why. If you go first, you can use this to kill a rear guard and get a draw. And then you can just use it to, like, kill Captain, or, like, kind of do a setup play for Don or Blue Sprint, but most likely you just want to kill Captain, because as long as he has a gauge on him, he'll just come right back. But the thing is, you call this for sack fodder. This is basically like my Kokabeel. If you don't know what I did for Kokabeel, is I ran her in all my Bastion decks up until set 4, and then I replaced her with the better Kokabeel, but I still keep it the same purpose. I use them as discard fodder, not because I don't like them or because I don't think they're good. It is because I never wanted to discard my attacking pieces, and the one deck I ran without either of them, the deck went to shit because I had no discard fodder, which means I had to constantly discard my combo pieces. Now I've learned the value of wanting to run the discard cards, even though I already did it anyways. So now that I rerun them, I've decided that maybe in the decks where I have space for, I should do it the same. For Theranos here, he is definitely discard fodder for PGs, but also for skills like Captain, because literally during the recorded game, I called him 2 times to the back row just to sack fodder because I didn't want to call a fucking trigger or another grade 3. So, Theranos Xeno worked really good in that case, and you can also use him for Anger Blader to send him to another gauge. All around Theranos, he has his own purpose. He's not meant to go off. His purpose is to be fodder for everyone else, and that's the good thing. You don't have to run a card just to use its skill. You can run a card just to use it as fodder. Now, if you're wondering why I choose to run this over like a grade 2 vanilla, well, to be fair, they may have the same stats, but this one has an Excel gift and Twin Drive, so worst case scenario, if I have to ride one, I'd rather ride the one that's a grade 3 with Twin Drive and Excel gift. So 2 copies of Theranos, because he helps in his own way. Next up, we have our actual grade 3s that you want to ride. 4 copies of Thundering Sword Dragon Anger Blader, grade 3 Twin Drive Excel gift, 12k base. I don't know why, when I look at this thing I see a fish, I don't see a dinosaur. Active Vanguard, put a rear guard face down as an equip gauge for another rear guard. This thing under any of your grade 2s, or Blue Sprint for that matter, and choose one of your opponent's rear guards, kill it. So via the cost of just gauging a rear guard, or turning a rear guard into the gauge, you just kill an opponent's rear guard. Yeah, you're not really minusing since you want things to have gauges, okay. And then Auto Van, when it swings, counter into anything by the way, Counterblast 1, stand 3 of your rear guards with 3 or more equip gauges on them each, and all of your former rear guards get +5 until end of turn. Or sorry, all your former units. So yes, they do have to have 3 gauges on them, and you can only stand 3 of them. But everything in the front row, regardless of what's stirred or not, gets +5, including himself. Yeah, if you don't remember, this is the card Bushy banned after a tournament. The funny thing is, that was the one tournament, well, not the one tournament, I've watched 2 tournaments, but that was the first tournament and the only tournament I've ever watched online, and I got bored really quickly. Like, that was the most boring tournament I've ever seen, but it was, I think it was Lukier versus Anger Blader. Anger Blader was just, I don't know, the game was just slow and boring, but, like, definitely Anger Blader, despite being banned almost immediately, proved his purpose. And then when he was unbanned, I was really happy because I never got to play him before. I mean, yeah, I play casually, but I don't really like to break rules when I'm playing casually unless it's to test out something. So I never really got to use Anger Blader, and then I finally got to use him, and he's really nice. Definitely in this deck, it's kind of a debatable thing because if you have to sit on him for a long time, you won't get your deck's full purpose off because this is meant to be retired, and so is this one. And while they can gauge themselves, every other card in this deck that can gauge, minus Mega Rex, requires you to, gauge a unit without an equip gauge on it. So out of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units that can gauge, only 3 of them can actually gauge themselves, but they all have to actually swing to do so. So that's kind of the downside to it. So Anger Blader, still a good grade 3 though. Gets you possible multi-attack. It gives your front row +5, which is good, and then kills an opponent's rear guard and then gives you more benefit out of it. Either way, Anger Blader is a really good grade 3, and I like him for 4 of. And our final normal unit and our final card in the deck is 4 copies of our main grade 3 Military Dragon Raptor Colonel. For some reason, it's so satisfying. Like, I did a similar combo with Gaia with the, Theranos over here and then killing Regidon and Blue Sprint. For some reason, when I do it in Colonel and I use Raptor Captain, Regidon, and Blue Sprint and then kill 2 more rear guards, it feels far more satisfying killing 5, calling 3, and giving them all power, and then shooting with this thing than just using Gaia to get extra criticals and power. I don't know why. This thing just feels more satisfying than Gaia to me. I still like Gaia, but this thing feels more satisfying. Anyways, grade 3 200 Excel gift 12k base, auto van once per turn when this unit swings, counterblast 1 if you have one or more rear guards, retire any number of them. So you can just counterblast 1 to counterblast 1. Why you would do that is beyond me, but sure. And then retire any number of your rear guards. For each unit retired for this cost, it gets +5 per turn. Yeah, for some reason people think that you need to be your opponent needs to be a grade 3 for that, or like they think that's not good enough. We're all aware Gaia did a similar thing, and it would only ever get the critical if it swung to a grade 3, right? Like, we're all aware of this, right? None of us are dumb, because this thing can get far more power output. Like, yeah, okay, you could just sack one rear guard and then they're even, but remember, Gaia can only sack one. You could just sack both of these two at the same time, get +9, 17 out of it, and then proceed to call 2 rear guards. And you can still nuke Raptor Captain. Like, there's no downside to going first with this. I mean, you don't get Vanguard stand, but you still get 3 extra attacks out of it, and the second skill ain't restricted to grade 3s. What are people complaining about? What? Oh, you don't get a restand when your opponent's not a grade 3 or greater. It's suddenly boo, bad, boo. What the fuck you mean? This thing swings for 29, 35, 36-ish on its own first grade 3 turn. You still get multi-attack out of it, and it still gets shut down by triggers. Okay, we all know triggers are bad against Excel decks, but we all remember Aquaforce could do a similar thing, except not that same level of power of Vanguard. This thing can literally do the same thing. So why are people talking shit about Raptors is beyond me, but okay. If you retired 5 or more, though, and your opponent's Vanguards are grade 3 or greater, stand this unit at the end of the battle. So, you know, you can just play Mega Colony and then use Brilliant Blister because the Vanguard is still arrested, and then rest of the rear guards that get called from this ability, such as, because the ability's not finished yet, so you would call Raptor Captain, Regiodon, and Blue Sprint, and you could just rest them, but, yeah, Colonel still gets the restand. It's really good, and he doesn't lose draft checks, and he keeps the power. And then during your continuous Vanguard, during your turn, any of your units placed during the battle phase, anything placed by this, gets +5 for the turn. So 14. Anything placed by this, most likely this, 14. Cool. Anything placed by this, from history, this, 10. Plus an Excel gift, 15. Okay then. And then you get your front triggers. Yeah, you can see why I say, like, I don't know why people complain about this. Still good. You kill 3 rear guards, 27k swing, first grade 3 turn. Even if they're not going on grade 3 right now, you can still multi-attack the shit out of them because neither of these 3 require your opponent to be at grade 3 or greater for their abilities to go off. They just need to die. So, Colonel's pretty good. 4 of, like, he might not be the best at first grade 3 turn, but you also gotta remember he's also the least likely. I'm not saying anything that came out of collection set will be banned, but if they just started hitting everything in the collection set, this is probably one of the last cards they will hit. So for a Raptor Colonel, he is very simple in his skill, but he is very effective in doing so against non-Excel decks. I mean, non-Force decks. And then we come to our gifts. 5 XL1s, 5 XL2s. They both are very similar in the sense that they both make a new front rear guard circle when acquired, and the difference is, well, they also go on top left, then top right, and they alternate between the two. But the difference between them is XL1, the unit on it gets +10 during your turn, and XL2, the unit on it gets +5 during your turn, but also when the XL2 marker is made, you get to draw a card. So this one's definitely made for more fetching of resource, and the game's going to go longer, but if you're going to try to end the game quickly, go with XL1 to get more power out of your calls. But I do think regardless, you should just go with XL2 because Colonel literally gives a +5 to any unit that's placed. Like, this immediately turns your XL2 into an XL1. So you might as, or at least the unit was placed during the battle phase will become an XL1. So you might as well use it just to get the draw, especially because, you know, you're still losing 2 rear guards and your drive check will most likely be what you guard with. So you kind of want the XL2. But if you really think your opponent's going to kill you quickly and you're going on second grade 3 turn, or first grade 3 turn, but you're going second, you might want the XL2 just to finish it quickly. But I mean, XL1 just to finish it quickly, but I do prefer XL2 in this case. Quick Shield, one of your tactics +5k for the battle. You use this as discard fodder for if you choose to run Prism Bird, this is what you discard it for, or you could use it for PGs and that's pretty much it. Otherwise, if you run neither of the two, you just get a free Quick Shield. So, yeah. And that was the deck, so I hope you guys enjoyed. All around, Raptors are definitely one of my favorite decks, especially this one. You get power, you have 2 alternate choices in riding. You could run Spinal Driver over Anger Blader, but Spinal Driver is an archetype card, and I hated seconds go with the Burning Passion, and sacking 2 rear guards doesn't really do much. Like, yeah, it sets up, but you're not getting too much power out of it, and compared to Colonel over here, to where Colonel arguably does make the better ride out of the two for first grade 1 turn. For first grade 3 turn. So, yeah. Yeah, that's the deck though. It's honestly really fun. It's a combo deck. It's kind of like what Beasties are. Like, I love combo decks, except like the complicated ones like Beasties. In my opinion, Beasties are complicated, but this deck is definitely one of the combo decks that aren't complicated, which means it's really fun to me. So if you guys enjoyed, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, donate to the Patreon, join Discord, follow Twitch, and I'll see you on the next one. Don't forget to stand up your vanguards.